Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. This week we have Mark Porter, the CEO of Highwire Networks, stock ticker HWNI. Highwire Networks is a U.S.-based managed cybersecurity platform that delivers AI-powered security operations centers, SOCs, and network operations centers, NOCs, services exclusively through channel partners like MSPs and MSSPs. Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Will.
So, Mark, you've been at Highwire Networks forever. Of all the guests I've interviewed, you probably have one of the longest tenures. What were you up to before then? And kind of what was the call like when you got the job offer at Highwire Networks? Was it public at the time? Did you take it public? Kind of explain kind of the back history of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I've had basically 3 jobs my entire adult life, this one being the predominant one. Prior to any entry into technology, I had the opportunity to serve in the Chicago area, serve the community as a police officer. So believe it or not, probably the greatest training ground for sales and customer service that you could ever imagine. And really a lot of experience learning how to deal with difficult people, as you might well imagine. So not necessarily finding people at their best. I got into telecom with a company that was affiliated with the Lucent organization. And I was actually working my way through college at the time, trying to finish my undergraduate degree with the intentions of eventually going to law school, which I did for a little bit before I found my conscience. Realized that was not for me. I did not like that, but I really took to telecom and technology very quickly. Ironically, I couldn't do much with a computer. I mean, this was late 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't an everyday thing. My big experience with computers was actually in a squad car where you hit a button to say what you were doing. As we moved into 2000, I realized there was a real problem in the telecom space. We had upgraded every single customer we had in 1999. My region that I was running at the time, I moved very quickly into management. My region was running 300% of quota. And I realized we had disrupted about 100 years of cycles. One of the cool parts about Lucent, it was really a offshoot of the AT&T, Western Electric, all the big Bell conglomerates. And so they had data, lots of data. And we had upended 100 years of cycles. And when I looked at my forecast going forward, I realized we weren't going to sell anything. In addition to the fact that we had jammed upgrades down everybody's throat that it turns out they didn't need, and they didn't tell us in the business side of it, but it turns out they knew. The CEO actually got in a lot of trouble for it. They knew they didn't need them. And then we were also introducing very disruptive technology. The industry was moving to voice over IP. And I was trying to figure out how we were going to go tell these customers, I'm really sorry you didn't need that upgrade. And now we have to move you to this other platform because we're going to end of life all the stuff we just sold you. And, oh yeah, by the way, this new stuff kind of doesn't work very good. If you think about voice over IP, if you were around in 2000, 2001 era, so it almost never worked.
Yeah. Can I double click on that? So in theory, AT&T is trying to prevent the innovator's dilemma partially, right? By ripping the Band-Aid off and trying something new, even if it's not fully developed because they can't be left behind. But as you're saying, it didn't go so well. So yeah, can you just explain a little bit of how this is a lesson for a lot of companies that have to kind of pivot, but at the same time, don't screw your current customers.
It was really tough to be on the front lines of that.
Did you feel like a cop in Chicago, kind of?
No, I felt a lot more helpless actually, because there was another whole thing that was happening. Is that the the landscape was changing dramatically because also through the late 90s, if you remember, companies like Quest were laying fiber at a feverish pace, and they created this perfect storm where the technology was changing so fast. If you look at it, Lucent's here's how the story ends when you do stuff like this. Lucent got broken up. Avaya was their enterprise voice company. It's now been through bankruptcy twice. Nortel Technologies was the largest company in Canada, went bankrupt in 2000. They struggled and finally succumbed in 2000, December 9th of 2008. I can tell you exactly why I know that date at a later time. I was their largest supplier at that time in enterprise services. So what happened was we changed technology so quickly. We weren't listening to the customers. We were jamming stuff at them, and they were consolidating quickly all at the same time. And then the telecom bust of 2000 hit because we built this kind of strange phenomenon where they put so much fiber in the ground. All the while, the technology to transmit data over fiber was advancing so quickly that you could, I believe at the time, the statistic was like every 6 months, you could transmit twice as much data over a single wavelength as 6 months prior. They were using dense wave division multiplexing was a big thing in the transmission. So we created massive amounts of capacity and then technology that was minimizing the need for capacity. And then all of a sudden you had this issue where all of the carriers were consolidating and going bust. The customers were consolidating their buying power, and they turned the tables on the vendors, and it got bad.
Would you say the main winner, because I've heard that it was this, as people look back in it historically, everyone looks at it as this kind of like beautiful disaster overlaying all the pipes because it allowed things like YouTube to exist and it allowed all these different kind of internet businesses. Mm-hmm. And it does remind me too of even just something like Kodak or something like that, Polaroid, where it's like more people today take photos than ever. Why are the two biggest photo companies, why were they left behind? Where like people transmit data and telecom is more important than ever. How did these big players somehow get left behind, and like what's the lessons from that?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and Cisco was probably the biggest beneficiary coming through that. And I think in part they just had a better mousetrap. They had a better machine. They weren't in voice; they were in data. Really, I mean, they were in voice, but customers were really sort of biased towards Nortel or Lucent / Avaya. Between the two of those, that was 70+% of the market share, and Cisco was trying to steal it. Because I think, honestly, because of the rise of cell phones and the acceptance of relatively poor quality communications and calls dropping and things like that, voice over IP eventually became acceptable, and Cisco, I believe, went at the voice part of the business with a position that having a good enough product and a great marketing scheme was okay, and they owned all the plumbing. So at the end of the day, Cisco and now Microsoft, Microsoft Teams. I lived through the early versions of what has now become Teams, and it's nothing like it was. And they got to a place where they owned base, right? And they capitalized on their base, and others could not. The telecom companies had a really hard time trying to take the data networking piece, and Cisco just kicked their butts.
So we'll fast forward from there. You're working in the telecom industry, and then how did that switch into cybersecurity? Did you have to go to night school to learn cybersecurity in a whole new niche, or did you just kind of learn on the job? And tell me about what was your first job at Highwire Networks, and then kind of like how did you transition into CEO?
Sure. When I came in very early on, I'd actually hired the company to do some outsourcing for my region for services. They had just started up. Story was a lot better than reality, to be candid. And I was looking at what was going on. Again, I'm looking at how the hell am I even going to make 1 times quota, much less 3 times quota. And I had this sort of theory. I was looking out at markets, looking at what's going on when you're hitting a recession, which was absolutely going on. And I looked at the car business. In the car business, people don't buy new cars, they buy used cars, and the parts suppliers go way up, and service goes way up at dealerships. They rely on their service business when new car sales are down. So I figured we were headed for kind of a multi-year slump while customers figured this out, while vendors were all consolidating. There was just a lot going on. And the opportunity came up to join these guys because I was the only one who really understood voice technology. And ironically, people thought I was very much a technician or a technically oriented guy. I really wasn't. I actually came from the sales side. I enjoyed sales, but we were struggling so mightily with our installations that I would go out there in my suit and crawl around in attics and whatever and come home looking like I'd been in a coal mine sometimes, much to my wife's chagrin, to make sure the installations went okay. And I just learned how stuff works. I just kind of, if I have one, I'm good at figuring things out. And that's, I think, probably super important for any entrepreneur. But as I joined the company, like a lot of startups, it was tumultuous. The ownership was constantly changing, and the landscape was really horrific. And it was founded on a really good idea, which was to be a services-only company. And as we refined it, we really started looking at this voice over IP thing was the future. It was going to work. It was, everybody was going, the manufacturers were going to force it down our throats, right? So being good at implementing it was novel. So let's get good at implementing it, and let's get really narrow for a minute and focus on a couple of solution sets. And we were really focused on Nortel Technologies and one or two products they had that were very cutting edge. And then ownership kind of changed around, and myself and another guy ended up owning it. It was a little bit like a game of Survivor for the first couple of years. I had, in the meantime, I'd also started a structured cabling company, and because that was something that Highwire didn't do. And so eventually we folded that into the mix and became more full service. But that was how I came. So I was kind of a sales guy, if you will, or a biz dev guy, really, at the end of the day, because I had a lot of industry connections. And then within a year, myself and another gentleman owned it. And I was the chief operating officer, and then ultimately took it over from him. And it was really, I would say, all the way through for a long, long time, it was on a simple premise, which was to deliver services through others. So learned early on how to build a channel. And I think that has served us really well, because building channels is all about relationships. Say what you're going to do and do what you're going to do, what you say you would do, right? And follow through. And we became the guys, the brand became known as the guys that you could call when nobody else could get something done, or we were just crazy enough to do things that others couldn't, maybe the time frame, maybe the complexity, whatever. And it was pretty awesome. I mean, we did some amazing things in the technology services. We oversaw the largest government rollout of voice over IP ever. It's still out there. In fact, that contract started in 2004, and it just, the final pieces of it just terminated. It was tens of millions of dollars, probably over $100 million when it was all said and done. We did major rollouts for every retailer in America. We've done, if you've been on a wireless network in a retail store, we probably installed some part of it, maintained some part of it, et cetera. Really had some phenomenal exposure to lots of different technologies over the years. And the sort of transformation into cybersecurity came from our customers, our partners, who were asking us what we were doing in that space. And internally, I had a few folks pitching me on it. To be perfectly candid, I was very naive about it. Everybody says that it takes twice as long and twice as much money, no matter what your budget for either is. Turns out they're right. Maybe even longer in a lot of cases. But hired a few folks to scale it up, build it up. They did a great job getting us to what I would consider a minimum viable product and a solution that worked and provided a lot of value. And, you know, if we fast forward to today, last year made a very, very difficult decision on the cybersecurity business to rip and replace literally the entire management structure of that business, because it was really important to go from the team that did a good job to the best team that we could put on the playing field in America. And proud to say, I think we've done that. And for the first time in my 25 years as a CEO, the folks who run that business, and it is a subsidiary, so we actually have a CEO, CRO of that business, Ed Vasco and Mark Dahlmeyer, and then more importantly, the people they've put in place underneath them. They're the most talented individuals I've ever had the pleasure of getting up and working for every day. So that's how we got to where we're at in the cyber business. We built the brand, and I would say I played a good role in the brand building, understanding, and learning marketing. Learning marketing is harder than learning cybersecurity to me. It's, I think, probably one of the most underrated things most CEOs just don't understand. And was fortunate, had some really good mentors in that space who helped me over the last 5 years figure that out. We built the brand, we built a good product and a great story. And now we have a phenomenal product, a great team running it, in the scale to go execute as we go forward.
So we danced around it a bit, but in your own words, what is Highwire Networks and what do you do?
Yeah, so today, very clearly, the story is very straightforward. In 2021, we reverse merged into a public company. I think I had 6 entities under one roof at that point between what we brought and what they had. Bad timing, as the OTC market was basically in the process of being crushed by regulation and other things. A lot of bad stuff had gone on. And so it went from an emerging growth capital market to a market where people were very leery of companies in that space. And to one of your points, I mean, the whole micro cap space in general is tough. It's even tougher on the OTC because most funds are prohibited in investing into that space. And so you get a lot of predatory structures, and it's not great for the company. It's not great for their shareholders. As we looked at the way out of it was to unwind that really complicated cap table that they had. Again, probably was a little naive, and some of the folks that were on that cap table learned a lot of great lessons, which we can talk about a little later, but ultimately grew each of the businesses and sold most of the businesses off or shut them down if they had no hope of growth. And now we're left with a really awesome managed cybersecurity business, and we talk a lot about that, and then a wholesale telecom business that is a really great business, makes money for the company, and long term may or may not be part of the future, but ultimately generates cash flow for the organization right now. And we've grown that. We've done a major overhaul and grown that as well. So really, we're down to those 2 businesses, and the focus going forward is all about the cybersecurity business because the sky is the limit in that space.
And with my poking around and kind of brief research, it seems like kind of your main cybersecurity product is a dashboard that helps monitor businesses that you sell to actual other security experts that would be actually monitoring the client. So you don't have a direct relationship with the client as much as you have a distribution network of cybersecurity experts and agencies out there who would use your software to manage their clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say it a little bit differently because it's really, I'll say this, what's different, what's unique about us is that we're not selling technology. In fact, we don't think technology is exactly the solution. Technology is the problem. And I know that sounds kind of strange. We've talked to lots of industry experts about it, and their eyes go up when we say that. It's one of the reasons that Frost & Sullivan selected us 2 years in a row as one of the top 12 managed and professional cybersecurity companies in the Americas of hundreds of companies. And we're far and away the tiniest on there, but they believe that we have identified a megatrend. So technology has proliferated, and the attack surface of a typical enterprise has really exploded post-COVID. Right? It used to be everybody went to an office. Now, less than 50%. It's really capped out about 50% of all employees work in an office. I'm working from my home office today. You're working in a home office. That's the edge of our corporate network. Wherever all of my employees are, that's the edge of our network. Wherever all of the employees of all of the customers that we serve, and there's thousands of them, that's where the edge of their networks is. So how do you protect that, right? So what we did is we focused on a simple concept. I mentioned Cisco earlier. The downside to dealing with Cisco, the downside to dealing with Palo Alto, the downside to dealing with Fortinet, or any of these major vendors is vendor lock. If you really hone in on a single vendor solution, you're limited to whatever integrations they're willing to offer you. We saw an opportunity because we've always been technology and vendor agnostic in everything we've done. So we saw an opportunity when we talk to customers and we talk to our partners. One thing we know about working with partners and building a channel is that you have to meet people where they're at. And in cybersecurity, especially in the mid-size enterprise and down, they're lost. They're really challenged. We used to call it the dartboard approach, just the throwing darts at this solution or that solution and buying tools. Well, what happens is you get good at running tools, but you get no more secure. In fact, most studies would show you're arguably less secure because you're spending all your time keeping the tools running. So what we built is an ecosystem that takes into account the fact that there are things we've tested, vetted, and integrated. There's things that our partners sell. Some of our partners sell $1 billion worth of cyber. One sells $5 billion worth of cybersecurity stuff a year. And when I say stuff, I mean stuff. Everything from firewalls to whatever kind of niche solution there is. There's 4,000 plus point solutions out there that you can buy for your enterprise. It's overwhelming. And then the end user already has stuff. So we decided that we would build an ecosystem that would account for all three links in that value chain and then allow them and to allow us to say yes. Can you do this? Can you work with this? Yes. The question is, should we, right? It's a qualified yes. If it adds value, and oftentimes it does, then great. If it's adding noise, then it's just a distraction, because at the end of the day, cybersecurity is about providing proactively high fidelity information to the client, ideally before there's a breach, right? We don't talk about stopping breaches. We talk about driving outcomes. And there's the only way to do that is to account for that whole value chain. So our solution is really at the core of it. It's not really about a dashboard. It's about hyper automation, giving our partners who resell the solution a competitive advantage with their customers, because we can do things faster and more consistently with a higher degree of fidelity than our competition. And I'm not wed to my own technology, spending tens of millions in R&D as I go forward, because we're agnostic. So we take best of breed or emerging technology that we think is really compelling, bring it together in our offering stack, and then meld it with whatever the partners and the end users already have. So at the end of the day, that dashboard is about I'm going to try to simplify it. It's a complicated concept. It's a concept called operationalization. We are taking data from all over the enterprise. We are like the central nervous system of an enterprise. If you think about it, we sit at this like highly privileged location. All the signals emitted within and across your enterprise, and all the signals emitted at your enterprise from attackers, we see, and we interpret these signals. They mean something. So just because the thing happened doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's bad. By leveraging automation capabilities, both within the technologies that we've decided to bring to market or work with, and within our automation capabilities and the thousands of automations that we've built and written, and it's a commercial platform. It's just our secret sauce is in how we leverage it, and being able to cross correlate all those things. We operationalize the data by taking these abstract signals and being able to go back to our partner or their end customer and say, this thing happened. It doesn't look like it's bad, but why is that service running on your network? Why is that port open on your server? Maybe you should tighten this up. And I can do that really, really quickly. We do stop attacks. We can do that very well. We can run 1,300 plus steps on a simple alert coming out of our SentinelOne platform, big brand, everybody knows. We take that data out of SentinelOne. We run it across like 13 other things. We can do 1,300 steps on it in under a second and a half, make a decision without a human ever seeing. So it's no longer objective. We don't get human error. It's very subjective, and we're running it against databases, some free ones, some paid ones, and most importantly, all the real-time data that we're collecting of our own and doing cross-correlation so that by the time it gets to the customer, they can count on the fact that we believe this was either malicious or benign, or that they should take action even though maybe it was benign, they should take some forward action. That's really, at the end of the day, what we're selling. And our partners, we had to go on a journey. We've been around for 25 years. We've been doing the cybersecurity now for just about 4.5. The COVID era, during COVID, it was kind of slow, which was in a way good. But we've had to go on that journey from being a trusted partner to a trusted authority. And by having the best people in the business now, like I talked about, the things we've done in the last 6 months, the things this team has executed on, I'm nothing short of amazed at how great operationally the product works and how well it positions us for scale going forward.
So on top of you having now a world-class team behind you too, how much has kind of the catching the tailwinds of the AI renaissance and the topic du jour, how much has that helped you in the last 3-4 years as you all kind of figured out all the different steps of looking at all these signals, figuring out what the patterns are, figuring out what's a threat or maybe just a some sort of thing that you need to look into? This all sounds perfect for AI. So yeah, like how have you implemented and what has surprised you with your AI implementation so far?
Well, this topic comes up a lot, and I think when I look at it, there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different ways people are looking at AI. A lot of people are looking at it from a cost savings perspective. A lot of people are looking at it. Agentic AI is coming into play and really creating new and unique opportunities. I really believe, and I think our team as a whole really believes, and by the way, Ed and Mark, who run the cybersecurity business, they've co-authored a book about this and the opportunities it creates. We believe it's as much about the strategy that you build to leverage it as what the technology will do, because it's changing really quickly, right? And so all of the tool sets that we leverage talk about it. They talk about machine learning as well. And machine learning is a huge part of what goes on in cybersecurity, especially human-assisted machine learning, where the machines are watching our people and the decisions they make, because it starts to auto-tune itself. So that's not really AI as much as it's the machine sees a condition. We have rendered a decision. I shouldn't say it's the humans anymore. A lot of it is driven by our automations. The platform sees that this is what we chose. And if it sees that exact condition again, we will either see it or not see it based on the decision that we fed it, right? So that's a real common thing. Where we see things moving is really in the agentic AI realm, where our personnel will be driving an agent, a co-pilot, whatever you want to call it, or a group of agents, as you look across managing multiple platforms and synthesizing them for an enterprise. First of all, it's an impossible thing for most enterprises to do unless they have virtually unlimited budgets. The Fortune 100, Fortune 500, even they are moving out of it more and more because keeping up with it is just too hard. Shared services models, we believe, are absolutely key, because we're seeing data from thousands of customers instead of just one enterprise, right? So by doing that, if you and your friend are both customers, you're unwittingly and unknowingly helping each other. If something happens to you, I'm better equipped to help your friend, unfortunately for you, right? And vice versa. So we hope it happens to him. No, I'm just kidding. We hope it happens to nobody. But as we get information in real time, we see something new or novel, we're able to immediately create, and if you think about this in agentic AI, it will be able to build an automation leveraging the platform. I won't even have to have a person do that. I'll have a person proof it ultimately, but 95%-ish of it can be built very quickly. It can be coded and dropped into that platform. So in a matter of moments, I can now go and look across every single customer in our service sphere for something novel that just happened. Now, that might tell me it's bad. It might also tell me, you know what, this is happening on every one of our customers, so it's just some sort of new something, right? And then we have to go dig. But as you look at agentic AI and you look at each sort of tool set and how to synthesize them, having essentially an agent that's able to interface with them, having a human driving multiples, this is going to be really exciting for us because one, it'll make the outcomes better. And that's at the end of the day, the most important part. It has to be about really delivering world-class service for the customer. And that's when things are good and when things are bad, because bad things happen in our business. That's a daily occurrence where something happens with a customer. We can't stop everything. There's things they do that defeat themselves, right? As long as you have human beings in your enterprise, I've got bad news for you. You're going to get breaches. They click on stupid things and we can't defend them from everything. Anybody who says they can should immediately be disqualified as a vendor or a partner, because it's a bold statement. Some vendors out there do it, but yeah, we want to be reasonable in expectations. But for us, what that means to the business, and we're already seeing this happen, it means really significant investments in our growth in our gross profit. And as we scale our revenues, whether organically or inorganically, we can add revenue very quickly to the mix without adding cost, because we can do a lot of that development in-house, and we can scale without human beings in our security operations center. We've already built to a critical mass, and now it's a matter of efficiency. And that you have to staff for coverage. You have to be 24/7. We're 24/7, 365 onshore, own employees, which, by the way, is not common in businesses our size. A lot of them are smaller, do some offshoring, things like that breaks most frameworks. You can't meet framework requirements. But as we go forward, that's really the future for us. And now, with some of the things that we're doing on the corporate side, which is my primary role, we expect that we can drive that growth and get to that place where AI will drive gross profit, which will ultimately drive EBITDA, and most importantly, the best outcomes for our customers.
So as we wrap this up, this might be a little bit redundant, but as you mentioned that you kind of float on top of all the different mega platforms and make sure you don't you're agnostic to them all, and make sure you don't just specialize on one. It all is reminding me a lot of our conversation earlier with the big telecom build out, and then building out all the biggest companies building out this big physical infrastructure just to find out that data becomes so cheap over time to move around that it's a software problem as much as a physical problem. Now the biggest companies in the world are building out the biggest AI data centers of all time. Who knows if they're overbuilding or not? You are trying to learn your lesson and stay above this, not become an expert.
Not a coincidence.
Not become one AI. So yeah, I would love for you to kind of just wrap this all up with the lessons you've learned and the strategy and how this all kind of works together.
Yeah, it's funny. The conversation started sort of ad hoc, right? And we're all shaped by our experiences, right? We bring the human mind models, right? We bring all of the things we learned as a kid. We bring all of the influences, good, bad, and ugly, to whatever things we're doing in life. So those experiences scarred me. Running a business built around a single technology. I mentioned in December 9th of 2008 was Nortel's bankruptcy. That was the third major bankruptcy that we experienced of a customer in 90 days. If you kind of remember, the world was coming to an end. There was no liquidity. Financial markets were frozen up. I guess they say we were within 24 hours of ATMs not having cash, right? It was dire, and that was a bad time. We were single threaded. We were very tied to, at that time, Nortel Networks, and not just, even though I had the biggest customers in the world, all the Bell companies were my customers. I deployed services for them. At the end of the day, I was deploying services around a single technology. And so it's as if the currency in which we all traded evaporated overnight. And the turmoil that followed for the last 2 years was miserable. So when we look at being agnostic and we look at the way our platform works, this is a key differentiator. I can say to any customer, you can be my customer. I can meet you where you're at, and I can help guide you on this journey as we go forward. And I want to, right? If I'm not able to do that for you as my customer, then I'm probably not adding enough value. So as things evolve, I mentioned there's like over 4,000 point solutions. There was 2,000 or so when we started this. There was 1,400 6-7 years ago, right? So the technologies that are being leveraged to detect are continually evolving. Some of our competitors have their own platform, their own XDR, their own EDR, their own this. If you miss one cycle, you're dead. Like that's how wicked this is. Look at BlackBerry, right? Nortel doesn't exist, BlackBerry. And the common thread, not just that they're Canadian, the common thread is that they miss technology cycles. And if you miss just one cycle, you're screwed. CrowdStrike, I'll throw out as an example of a company that could have been completely dead in the water, but did an amazing job handling a brutal crisis, right? So all of these things are happening. Our position is we think all those tools are great. It's really how you use them. And if something better comes along, we'll transition. We're in the third generation of our XDR platform, and our customers benefit from that because as we see something changing that's really important, we will move them. And they have a say in it. They can, and if they're absolutely hell-bent to stay with something, we'll tell them exactly why that we're moving. And usually that sways their mind. But if they want to stay, then we'll figure out what a transition plan looks like for them. But we can always move to the best and brightest. When we sell a solution, we're at the end of the day, they're buying from us in a SaaS model through their partner distribution, their partner of choice that they work with, typically a managed service provider. But they're not buying SentinelOne from us. They're buying managed endpoint detection. They're not buying XDR from a specific person. We see a future where we might offer multiple XDR platforms, which is really the most comprehensive and kind of brings all of these things together. We think it's an absolute vital service, but it's not one size fits all. The future is one size fits one. And as you look at all of the IT business, I'll share something that I think is absolutely fascinating and something that we're adapting to very quickly and sort of informs the strategy that I just shared with you. We watched the buying shift happen. We didn't really understand why it was happening, but we could see it happening where people weren't buying solutions the way they were like, I'm going to buy this, I'll buy that. It changed. And I had been at a show, a conference where I saw Jay McBain from Canalys speak. And he brought forth that 2024 was a pivotal year. It was a really significant year for our industry, for all of technology, because millennials, for the first time ever, controlled 50% or more of IT and cybersecurity budgets. And they buy different than people who are 50 years old, people who are 60 years old. And they buy that when they look at something and they look at what they want integrated. Integrated means easy. They want it to work. They don't want to have to deal with it constantly. They want it to be an easy solution to work with, a la managed, right? Which creates more of that opportunity. And they'll take something that's 80% as good as what they're replacing if it meets those criteria and if you'll work with them the way they want, which is email, text, other means of communications. And that's really important. And so they want a solution that's comprehensive and easy. And that's not easy to do in cybersecurity, but that is really at the end of the day, what we think we do for our partners and what they're doing for their customers is we're trying to make it really easy for them because what they don't want is an alert factory, which a lot of managed detection is. You go deploy any EDR, it's going to start throwing you thousands of alarms. That's why we have to filter hundreds of thousands of alarms a week. We filter them, less than 1% mean anything, right? So that's really what we're trying to do. And that's a competitive differentiator. And it is really because I've learned a lesson about being single threaded.
No, that's really interesting about the corporations, the purchasers being a whole new generation. And it sounds like gone are the days of you don't get fired ever for buying IBM type things, and that you're now.
That was a real common phrase when I came up in telecom, and it was the same. It was the same in the Lucent world when it was. Lucent was the most commonly held stock in the world when we were out selling the product, and customers would say, "Oh, I'm a shareholder. Do I get a discount?" Like, "Oh yeah, we'll go all the way down to list price for you." You know, so it is a whole different world, and vendor lock is a real problem now because if your vendor falls behind, you fall behind. right? So we want to be able to be cutting edge. We want to do it in such a way where we can drive SaaS-like margins, which is going to drive return for our shareholders, right? And we want to do it in a way where we're not tied to technology where we're burning tens of millions of dollars in R&D when our competitors are burning hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter in R&D, right? It's an arms race. And in a lot of ways, the pricing on the IP is a race to zero, where we look at IP. If we were to go out and do acquisitions of IP, it would have to be something that's really ubiquitous, something that's like an absolute staple and is a part of every stack that we offer, and it would have to be robust, right? Because there's just no way we want to be doing that. We want to be able to drive those margins through the services. All our contracts are multi-year recurring revenue contracts. So the business stage is set. And now, we just need to do it in such a fashion. We're moving to a new venue, do it in such a fashion where we can drive those kind of returns and continue to deliver a balance between what we think is pretty cutting edge. We're always looking forward, and the short term, which is, how do we drive that return for our shareholders now?
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people want to learn a little bit more about Highwire Networks and what you all are doing, where should I send my audience?
They would love for them to come to our website at www.highwirenetworks.com.
Sounds good. And for all of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thanks, Will. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast Express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information